Hello cyberspace, my name is Garrett Mills and welcome to episode 4 in my Minecraft 1.7.10 modding series. In this episode we're going to take a look at creating our first block and inserting that into the game. Now if you haven't, I recommend you start at the beginning of this series so that you can get your mods set up and all of the files that you need to have at this point set up, and you can do that by clicking the eye in the top right hand corner. Now if you've done all that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I've got Eclipse open here to our mod project folder. As we've been doing, we want to kind of keep things organized. So for our blocks, we're going to make a new package to hold them. So it's going to go in our mod package and we're just going to call it blocks. Now in this blocks package, just like we did in the items package, we want a class that we can register the blocks in so that they can be loaded from one central location. So we're going to have a new class. We're going to name it TootModBlocks. So this class is going to be where we register our blocks. And it's going to look a lot like this TootModItems class. It's just going to be for blocks. So we're going to have public static final void blocks or init. So this is where we will actually register our blocks at. So now that we've got the actual init function written, we want to go and put this in our proxy so that it's loaded when the game starts. Now, just like items, we want blocks to be loaded on both the client and the server side so that they're accessible everywhere. So they need to go in our common proxy in the pre-init function. So we're going to have TootModBlocks dot, and then you see it pops up and we want init. So there we go, that'll automatically import the blocks class, and so when the game starts up, they should load from there. So similar to the way we did items, each block is going to be an instance of a class. However, because blocks are more dynamic, they have more settings that we need to set right off the bat, it's useful to have each block be its own class. So if we look in our items class, we see we extended item, so public static item, and then the name of the item. Well, we're going to do something a little bit different for the block. We're going to create a custom class so that we can set the settings for our block. So in this blocks class, so we're going to make a new class in our blocks package, and this is going to be for our tutorial block that we're creating. And where it says superclass right here, instead of just being object, we want to change this so that it extends the default Minecraft block, so that we already have all the scaffolding for the block. We just want to build on top of that. So instead of being java.lang.object, this needs to be net.minecraft.block.block with a capital B. And so then we can hit finish, and it'll create our new class that extends the Minecraft block class. Now you'll see we have an error on this. That's because the Minecraft block has to have a constructor telling it what material that block is made out of. So if you hover over that, you'll get, so here we'll just delete this. So if you hover over this, you'll see we have an error and it says add constructor. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to add the constructor. So add constructor, and there we go. And you see we have this weird variable name. That's okay. It's just wanting the material. So the way Minecraft blocks work is there's a set of defined materials, and those materials have properties like sound signatures, the way they behave, gravity, stuff like that. And so we need to give it a material to create the block with. Now there are some other things that we want to set in here also, some other attributes. So if you remember, like in our TootModItems class, we set like the texture name, the unlocalized name. These things are all called on the item class. The difference between what we're going to do with what we did with items and what we're going to do with blocks is rather than call all of these when we're setting it up, we can actually call some of them in here since there's more of them. So in this constructor, we're going to have a couple other attributes. So the first thing we want to do is, in the same way that you set the unlocalized name for an item, you're going to set the block name for a block. So we have this, which refers to our current class, dot set block name. And so one thing that's useful to do is to add a block namespace where you can define it. So string name. So then we're going to set the block name to name. So that's like running set unlocalized name. The next thing that we want to do is we can set the texture name also the same way that we set it in here. So we set the texture name like this. Well, we're going to do the same thing in here. So this dot set block texture name. And so then this is again going to be made up of a few different parts. So it's going to be the mod ID. So modvars dot mod ID. Then we have our operator, which is a colon, and then we have the block name. So this dot get unlocalized name. So block name, set block name, sets the unlocalized name also. So we can use this get unlocalized name function. So that sets our texture name, which we're going to need later on. And so now we have a couple other things to add. So that's the basics that we would want. The next thing we want to do is set the hardness. So hardness is an attribute of Minecraft blocks, which basically just means how hard it is to mine, to break. So I'm sure you played Minecraft, obviously. You wouldn't be here if you haven't. Stone is easier to break than obsidian. Stone has a lower hardness value than obsidian does. So we can set the hardness by providing, set this dot set hardness by providing it a float. So for example, I'm going to use 3.0 f to define it as a float. And just for reference, stone is 1.5 f. So stone has a hardness of 1.5. So anything above 1.5 is going to be harder than stone. And obsidian has a hardness of 50. So just for reference, that's kind of where those values lie. So we set the hardness. The next thing that we want to do is set the ambient light level. So like glowstone glows, glowstone has an ambient light level of 1.0 f. A block that doesn't glow like stone has an ambient light level of 0.0 f. So it's just how much light the block emits. So set light level. So let's just have it be 0.5 f. So glowstone is 1.0 f, stone is 0.0 f, just for reference. The next thing that we want to do is set the harvest level. So the harvest level defines the tool and what sort of tool that you need for mining the block. So this dot set harvest level. So we're going to have the string of the tool class. So what sort of tool? Well, let's just say that we're making something that's mineable by a pickaxe. So if you wanted it to be picked up by a pickaxe, you would put pickaxe there. Or if we want it to be picked up by an axe, we can just put axe, or spade, or hoe, whatever. So pickaxe. And then the level. So Minecraft tools have 4 levels, 0 through 3. 0 is wood, 1 is stone, 2 is iron, and 3 is diamond. So you can set what harvest level you want the block to be picked up at. So obviously if you have other mods installed, so mods like Tinker Tools or whatever that add higher levels to this, so like 4, 5, 6 levels of harvest above diamond, then you could set those higher. But obviously if you're in vanilla and you won't have those mods, then it's going to be difficult. It'll be impossible to pick it up. So let's say we want it to be harvestable by iron. So there we go. The next thing is we want to set the resistance. So the resistance is how like easily it's broken by explosions. Stone is very easily broken by explosions, whereas obsidian is not. So stone would have a lower resistance level. So let's say we're just going to pick a number 30F. So for comparison, stone has a resistance of 10 and obsidian has a resistance of 2000. So that's sort of your scale for that. And one last thing that we want to set is the step sound. So you know, as you walk across different kinds of blocks, they make different sounds. So when you're walking across grass, it has a different sound than when you're walking across stone than when you're walking across iron. So we want to run this dot step set step sound, and you can see it provides some suggestions. So we've got anvil, cloth, glass, grass, gravel, ladder, metal, piston, sand, etc. So I'm going to pick stone just to kind of be generic, but you can pick whatever kind of sound type that you want. And obviously there are more things you can set in here. We're not going to go through all of them, but if you just run this dot, and it'll pop up some suggestions, and you type set, and so then you can just look through here and see all the things that can be set. So bounding box, tell it whether a certain tool is effective against this block, things like that. But for our purposes, just some basic settings and attributes will be fine. One last thing that we want to do is set the creative tab. Set creative tab. Then we'll have creative tabs dot misc for now. And there we go. So what this is going to do, if we look back along our code, it's going to set the block name to whatever one is provided. It's going to set the texture name. It's going to put it in the misc tab, and then it's going to set the hardness to 3, the light level to 0.5. It's going to make it harvestable by an iron pickaxe. It's going to have a resistance of 30 to being blown up, and when we walk on it, it's going to sound like stone does. So now we just need to create a new instance of this. So up here in our mod blocks class, we're going to have public tutorial block. So there's our instance of that. And then in here we're going to actually initialize it. So we're going to have tutorial block equals new tutorial block. So in this constructor we're going to need a few different things. We're going to need the material type, and we're going to need the unlocalized name. So the material type, we can use just some built-in Minecraft ones. So materials dot, or material dot, and then we see we have a bunch of different material types. So air, anvil, cactus, cake, etc. I'm gonna go with rock. So material type dot rock, and then the unlocalized name, we're gonna have it be tutorial block. So that's going to, oh, and we want this to be static. So that's going to initialize an instance of our block, and it's going to load it into this variable. And then, like last time, the last thing we need to do is register into the game using the game registry. So game registry dot register block, So then we have the block, tutorial block, and then the name we want to use tutorial block dot get unlocalized name. So now that we have all this done, it's going to create an instance of our block, name it tutorial block, and then register it into the game. And so since we've already gone over the lang file, we can go ahead and set up a name for it. So in our source main resources folder, assets.tutmod lang, and then our lang file, we can add a new line. And now you would think it would be block.tutorialblock.name, but it's actually not. The way Minecraft assigns the object name for a block is with the tile name. So it's going to be tile.tutorialblock.name equals tutorial block. So there we go, we can save that file, and now we can load up the game, and we should see our block created. Alright, so once it's loaded, we can just load our testing world. And now if we go look in the miscellaneous tab, there it is. So it obviously doesn't have a texture yet, but we have our tutorial block. So we can place it. So there we go. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to actually create a texture for our block. And so we're going to do that similar to the way that we created a texture for our item. So we're going to need an image editor that supports transparency. Again, I'm using Pinta. I recommend paint.net if you're on Windows. We're going to create a new 16 by 16, and we want it to be transparent. So now we can just stylize our block. So we can use, let's stick with the flags theme. We'll just make it an English flag block, just because I have no better ideas, and it's really easy to draw an English flag. Okay. So now that I've finished my magnificently simple block texture, we want to go ahead and save it. So we're going to name it tutorial block, and we want to be sure that it's set to save as a PNG. And now we just want to go find our mod folder. So mine is here, and we want to go to source, main resources, assets, our mod ID, textures, blocks, and save it there. So now if we close our editor and we right click and hit refresh, we should be able to go open textures, blocks, and then we see our block there. Now if you remember, when we created our item texture, we had to prepend the item dot to it because we used the unlocalized name to set the texture ID. The same is true for our block textures. So we need to go refactor rename, and we need to prepend tile. So tile.tutorialblock.png. Hit save. Now we should be able to run our game. And once it loads up, Forge is going to go and find that block texture file for the block we created, and it's going to apply it to our block. So if we just go ahead and open our test world, and we should see, there we go, you can see that I miserably failed at making sure all the dots were filled in. But if you filled in your texture completely, that wouldn't be there. I just messed up. But we can see that we have our blocks in the shape of a miscolored English flag. And what it does is it will tile the texture around all the sides. And so it'll wrap around every side, will be identical. So that is just a basic block. Obviously there's some more attributes you could play with in here, and you could work on adding multiple blocks and setting custom classes up, but that's all we're going to go through in this video, just creating a basic block texture and getting it into the game. Alright guys, once again, thanks for watching episode 4 in my Minecraft 1.7.10 modding series. As per usual, I'll be down in the comments in case there are any questions, or if something didn't work quite right, or if you just want to connect with me and say hello. You can also connect with me on Twitter, on Google+, by blog, or via email, and links to do all that stuff are down in the description below. Be sure to get subscribed so that you don't miss any of the upcoming videos in this series or any of my other series. And as always, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.